So my name is Trevor Johnson Steigelman. I'm the moderator for this session. Towards the end, we will have time for questions. If you have a question, just get the speaker's attention and fire away at it. They will probably repeat the question so people online can hear it, and then they'll try to answer it for you. So our first talk is about code reviews. Ronnie Burt and Joe Fusco are going to co-present for this. They're both from Campus Press, and they're ready to start their talk. So let's go ahead and get started.
Good morning. Thanks for coming out early. I know some of us had a longer night than others. We're happy to be here this morning. And thanks to our moderator and to all the volunteers here and everything, really, for helping us get started. So my name is Ronnie Burt. I am with Campus Press and a company actually called InkSub. We do a couple of other projects, WPMU Dev and EduBlogs as well. And I've been with the company about 8 years, and really I manage the education and hosting services that we do as a company. Before that, I was a classroom teacher, and before that, I worked at the University of Texas in the Accessibility Institute, doing accessibility testing and all sorts of good stuff in the early 2000s, before really accessibility was as big as a deal as it is now. And it's changed a lot since back then, but that's really where I got my roots and kind of my foundation. So we're happy to be here, and Joe is one of our excellent developers, and he'll talk a little bit as well as we keep going. I tweeted a link to these slides at Ronnie Burt, and I used the WPCampus hashtag, so you can find them that way. So definitely check those out. The slides could be useful for you. Let's find the mouse. And also, I want to keep it pretty informal. I know questions are usually left till the end, but if there's something that's just burning, I was a middle school teacher for a long time. I'm used to interruptions, so please, that's going to be okay with me. And we want this to be as useful of a session for you as possible. So who are we kind of talking about when we're talking about code reviews? And the little slogan, actually, I'll go back. People use it, so it must be fine. And I think that that really kind of underscores a lot of just my experience and working with a lot of the universities that we work with and schools and other organizations, that there's a lot of stuff out there. A lot of it's really good. A lot of it's really good, but maybe not perfect for your situation. And so I just want to kind of build a framework around kind of the policies and the procedures that you might want to put in place to get going with vetting plugins, vetting themes, and making sure that you're setting yourself up to have a successful WordPress installation, for years and years and years to come. So for us, really what we primarily deal with are multi-site networks. So a lot of what our experience in is with large multi-site networks. We host hundreds of networks that have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of sites, and our one EduBlogs network with 4.5 million sites. So we're up for scale, performance, and all these sort of good things are really important to what we're looking for. You would also want to have a practice like what we're talking about in place with any site that's going to have the potential for high traffic. You really need to be lean, where performance is really a big, important part. If you're working, in a classroom setting, very popular e-portfolio solution where maybe you're going to have even hundreds of students logged into your WordPress installation at one time, and you have a lot of concurrent users, the needs that you have and the plugins that you're running and things like that are going to be different than if it's just like an occasional editor logging in to edit some content. Things can really get bogged down that way. And also on the front end, if you're going to have any sort of dynamic content you're pulling from third-party, outside the WordPress database, and you're pulling in content, or you're trying to syndicate content across different sites, all sort of good stuff like that, you need to be a little bit more mindful about the performance and the reliability of what you're trying to achieve. So the types of things that we look for, I'll go into a little bit more depth about each one of these points, or we will jointly as we go on. But WordPress guidelines is where we start. It's very surprising how many people don't even know they're there, or they don't read them, but there is a very much wealth of guidelines out there for WordPress itself, for themes, for plugins, what you would need to do to submit it to the WordPress repo, for example. And if you follow those guidelines, you're going to meet 99% of what we're going to talk about. We also do extensive testing on, I don't know what that means. Do you think we're still live streaming? Okay. Cool. So we do extensive testing on our usability, you know, the UX. Is it going to be something that's going to be a pain to support for end users if you're working with content editors that maybe aren't as familiar with using WordPress in general, or student use or something like that? You know, we're not just necessarily reviewing the code for code's sake and performance. We want to make sure that this plugin is not going to cause us problems on the support front. Accessibility, like I said, that's kind of where I got my start. There's things that we can look for and tools that we'll share. Performance is a big one, and security as well. So that's just a quick preview of what we'll talk about. So in the last couple of years, I just pulled some stats from the last 10 or 12 migrations that I found that we've done of pulling in some of our customer sites that we've been moving into us. And what I could find in kind of our logs, we reviewed 217 plugins that are in ours, 78 themes in the last couple of years. And about 38% of them failed our initial reviews. And that sounds kind of intimidating, like, man, don't, you know, that's cutting off a third of what I want to do, or more than a third of what I want to do. But usually we can, you know, it fails initially, we can take a closer look at it, make some small changes, or make sure that we're using it in a situation that makes sense, and we can still work with it. So it's not like an all or nothing fail thing. But the point of showing you these stats really was that a lot of what's out there may not be a good thing to just add to your WordPress installs. So the first myth that I kind of want to talk about is premium is better than free, which is kind of ironic because I also kind of manage a premium plugin shop. But just because you paid for it doesn't necessarily mean that it's quality code and that it's going to work well for you and that it's going to be supported ongoing and forever. You know, there's lots of really, really great places out there. There's lots of, I mean, we can talk about some examples of even our premium plugins that maybe wouldn't be great in certain implementations that really need high performance or something like that. So it's case by case. But these are kind of the things that I get requests all the time. We get plugin requests daily, and they're like, well, of course you can take it because we're going to pay for the license and those developers are going to keep up with it. And it's like, well, that doesn't always work that way. The second myth is that the newer plugins or the newer releases are always better than the old. We've been around for hosting sites for close to 12 years. We have some plugins that we wrote 10 years ago that we haven't touched since, and they're working just fine. Their performance is fine. The security is not an issue, and that's okay. And WordPress.org did this thing recently with plugins. Like if it hasn't been updated in 2 years, you get this big ugly warning that says stay far, far away from this plugin. And you know, they have their good reasons why they've done that, but perhaps that plugin is still going to be just fine for your need, you know? So don't let that scare you away. You need to dig a little bit further, do a little bit more testing, and don't just assume that because it's old and hasn't been updated, that it's not going to meet your needs. This is especially true with themes. You know, we have some old themes and old sites that are kicking along just fine, and there's no reason to apply an update because you might not be using that feature that update does or whatever. So we have a lot of requests like that this is brand new, it must be good. Another myth is if you go plugin shopping on the WordPress repo, for example, and identify on the number of downloads and kind of choose your plugins that way. I get that all the time. This plugin's on 25,000 sites. What are you telling me I can't use it? You know, or has even more, sometimes, you know, 500,000 downloads or whatever. Yes, that's a good factor to look for and vet because those plugins tend to have a community around them. Developers are, you know, typically adding new features and supporting it. That's all a positive thing, but the myth is that just because it's got a lot of downloads, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for you. You still need to do your due diligence to make sure that it's going to be the right thing. So I mentioned the WordPress guidelines. And if you haven't checked them out, then that's basically your homework. Now hopefully you should, if you've been here. Developer, non-developer, any WordPress user, there's going to be a lot of useful resources there for you on make.wordpress.org. There's handbooks, there's guidelines, plugins, themes, it's everything that they check. So especially if a plugin is being submitted to the wordpress.org repo for free, there is a review team that does a lot of the reviews that we're talking about for you and has vetted that plugin to some degree. And the themes are the same way. I think my experience is that the theme review might even be a little bit more intense. So if you're looking for like a parent theme to do some child theme work off of or something like that, you can feel pretty good about the wordpress.org repo for doing those themes, especially if you're looking for accessible themes and they're designated as accessibility ready in the wordpress.org repo, then you've got a long way, a lot of work done for you to make sure that you can feel pretty comfortable about choosing that for your next project, build a child theme off of it or whatever it may be. So definitely use that, bookmark it. We go back to it all the time. There's everything from your style, like just how the code should read and how it should be, notes should be there and everything, to the functions that you should use and everything like that. Good place to go. You also want to have as part of your process, Joe's going to talk a lot more about like the detailed looking at the code, but on my end, before it goes to Joe, we've done a lot of playing and vetting and reviewing before we get that far. So we want to take some time and play with the plugin, put it on a local install or whatever it may be. Make sure, I can't tell you how many requests we get of, well, I read the summary of the plugin, we bought it, it says it does what we want to do, so please add it to our live site, make it live now, right? And that's not the way that we want to do things. We want to make sure that it really does what it says it does, or that what you think it does is the same thing. I'm kind of a personal stickler for just adding annoying extra WordPress menu items on the left-hand side. And I refuse to accept plugins that add a bunch or even add one a lot, or I will work with the customer to tell them why this is a bad idea, because you're going to have 400 menu items on your left side here pretty soon, and that's not good for anybody. Does that plugin add any ads or nudges or notices or links to somewhere else? And if you're building sites for a faculty member or something like that, is this appropriate? Is this professional? Do you want your content editors to have access to that kind of stuff? Sometimes we can hide those easily as part of our process or things like that. Kind of mentioned this, is it going to be hard to support? Is it going to require like some crazy short code and there's no short code generator and there's no good list of those short codes and no one's going to have a clue how to use it? Well then, yeah, it might do what you want, but I want to find something else that's going to work better because the help desk is going to thank you later, right? And does it duplicate other plugins? We see, like, I'm going to keep going back to slideshows, like plugins that create slideshows, because that's like, for whatever reason, everyone loves to create their little slideshows, and there's like 400,000 plugins that do slideshows. And we'll get new networks, we're doing reviews of migrations, and they'll have 45 plugins on 100 different sites that all do slideshows. And I mean, why are we doing this to ourselves? And so do we already have something in place? Is another site we're using on campus already doing something similar? Can we just minimize the exposure that we're giving ourselves by having so many plugins that do the same thing? So go into some of the specific tools that we use in our process. The first thing is that as we monitor performance, so during the testing phase, but then this is also in production, kind of an ongoing process. New Relic has been really useful and instrumental for us in having on our live sites to be able to identify, potential problems with plugins as we activate them. We'll activate them and then we'll monitor and we'll see, if it's having an impact or something like that. xdebug.org, I think there's a plugin part to that. that a lot of our guys like to use to just help identify what's going on with the plugins that we're adding. StatsD WordPress client is a plugin that our CTO created that's free out there on the WordPress repo that goes with StatsD as an open source stats project that we run internally that helps us get a lot of data out of the sites that we host and then use that data to evaluate the plugins that we've implemented and things like that. The P3 plugin by GoDaddy is just an easy one to add to your network, especially like a test install as you're implementing, adding plugins, that it will show you kind of the performance things that are going on. And then now in the last year or two, like everyone else, we're an AWS place, Amazon services place, and so the Amazon CloudWatch logs that we've enabled are pretty valuable to us as well in evaluating performance and other things. The accessibility tools that I've come to like most recently that I just wanted to share is this, where we are, is the tenon.io, and then the new, if you haven't seen it yet, it's worth checking out, the Site Improve Chrome extension. I think it came out a couple months ago. It's free, that I just add as one of my Chrome extensions, and then so now it's part of when we're reviewing plugins, or especially when we're reviewing themes and putting in new sites and putting them on the front end. Just running that extension is just one way. There's no good way to automate accessibility checking, but this is like the most user-friendly method that I've seen to get close. And then on top of that, I would add, when we talk about accessibility and reviewing, 90% of the discussions that are out there are talking about the front-end sites and your end sites, your marketing sites, and things like that. But what's important to remember that's often forgotten is if you're using WordPress in the classroom with students in a learning environment for your students to use, then we also are more than obligated to make sure that those tools that the students are using are also accessible. So that means if you have a WordPress network or WordPress sites for classroom use, student e-portfolios, course blogs, whatever it may be, if you're adding plugins to that, if you're adding themes to that, we need to make sure that the backend is accessible as well. Out of the box, WordPress itself, the backend dashboard is improved significantly in the accessibility front. But if you start adding in your plugins, that's just one more thing to check that we're just adding to your list of what you need to be aware of. So that's just kind of important to note. For security, the part of our evaluation process for a long time, WP Scan, if you're familiar with, is just one sponsored by Security. That's an open source project that you can tap in that creates kind of a database of any known security vulnerabilities that you can check plugins and things against. We have an in-house list that we've been developing for years that we run against, and we scan daily against all the sites that we host. And just to note that that's part of a Defender plugin that we do make available to make those, to check against your, any plugins, any themes that you're using, if there's any known vulnerabilities out there, or known updates for any reasons like that. Just finding these sorts of databases that the communities have been building over time, and making sure that you're scanning plugins as you bring them online, or new themes as you're adding, but then also on an ongoing basis is definitely important. And then, so we have just within a week or two, a free code check plugin that is a fork of the WordPress theme check plugin that's out there, where we've added in some plugin checks to make it work for plugins too. We made that freely available, and that's pretty exciting. It's still new, so it's still a little, like there's some room for improvement for sure. But made it available for our customers, but for everyone out there as well, is just one other tool that you can go to just review a plugin. That's actually checking the code front and just giving warnings and checks and things that you need to be aware of that might come up in that review. And with that, I turn it over to Joe for a little bit.
Can I ask real fast on this? Is this only in GitHub, or is it in the repo too?
It's in the repo. I think like GitHub has got the latest. We haven't synced, but you can find it both.
All right, thank you, Ronnie.
Yeah.
So my name's Joe Fusco. I am actually a local here, well, over in Rochester, grew up in Buffalo, But yeah, I've been working for Campus Press for the last 2 years. It's been great. And yeah, I'm a developer for them. So just going on what Ronnie was talking about Campus Press Code Check plugin. Again, it's the one from Otto, Samuel Wood. You guys might be familiar with him. Very popular plugin. If you guys haven't been using Theme Check at all and you're a theme developer, I would highly recommend it. Definitely helps just bring awareness to some common issues before you do, if you do choose to submit it to the theme directory. If not, it's just still some good practices to do. As far as what Campus Press adds to that, we do have a few things that we require on top of that. And for example, we for our networks, we don't really allow them to play with the cache at all. Also, we don't allow them to remove any user roles. That's a big one. Flushing the rewrite rules. That's also it's a very expensive operation. There are some cases, everyone's different, where something might come down the line where we do allow it in, but generally speaking, anything that just flushes rewrite rules, we do not allow. We also require that any external request is done, it times out within 5 seconds. Again, everything is just case-by-case dependent. And we do recommend a few things like caching queries. Where's the mouse for this? There we go. All right, so a little explanation as to our process, how we actually handle these things. We utilize Git and primarily Bitbucket. So if a school has a theme that they want, they'll have their own themes that they develop themselves in-house. We do offer our own themes that have already been checked and already passed to our standards. But if something does come down the line, we do set them up with their own theme repository on Bitbucket. They then can fork it, make their changes, add it, send a pull request back to us, add Campus Press as a reviewer, and then we'll just go from there as far as adding comments, anything that we see. Most of the time with themes, it's not really, there's not really a lot going on. We might make some recommendations, but for the most part, there's not really a lot of issues with the themes that we see coming in. Again, Code Check plugin, the one that we just talked about, we recommend that the schools do utilize that before anything comes, do their own checks, just to save time as far as the turnaround before we actually accept it and add it to the network. So as far as the Campus Press developers, we test locally. We will pull down the changes that they submitted, and we will actually just start playing around with the theme or the plugin that they want. I find that's the most reliable way to start things off. We can also have a few strings that we look for as far as just quickly identifying where in the themes. Some of these themes and plugins are huge, so it could take a while. If you guys are familiar with grep, just the Unix command, you can search for exact strings in a file or in a directory, and it'll tell you like the file name and the line numbers. So that allows us to just get a rough idea of where these things are, and we'll go down the line and just kind of check. For example, we'll search for like file get contents, just to check out that the timeouts are all good. Nothing fishy is going on. No one's phoning home or anything. So we can provide a link to the actual just command that we use too. And if anyone isn't comfortable with using command line, I know it's a little, at first it's just intimidating or whatever. It's really not. If you guys don't use it a lot, I would recommend just kind of playing around with it. but you can also use stuff, you know, like Sublime and your text editor, Atom, and just search that way too for certain words. Yeah, so I mean, testing locally, just anything visually, we don't really, I wouldn't say deny something if there's something just kind of seems off design-wise. That's on them. We do offer recommendations to them as to how they could improve maybe the user experience of something. But generally, it's just security stuff and performance that's going to affect the network directly. All right. There are some issues that we do see, especially it affects a lot of migrating sites to Campus Press. For example, we just had a site from, it was Ohio State, the Lantern. It's like their main school newspaper, and there was a situation where some plugin was writing directly. They're writing to the file system. They weren't utilizing uploading things as an attachment in WordPress, so things were kind of getting hidden. They weren't showing up correctly. So when we migrated it over, that causes a lot of issues with things breaking, things aren't showing up. You're just like, what's going on here? So then we'll have to write a custom script to get things properly in WordPress using the native functions, and it just saves a lot of time if everything is set up correctly. So utilizing WordPress native functions is definitely the way to go with that. Let's see here. Again, going off what Ronnie mentioned before, code quality, just because you paid for something or someone paid for something doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be the best. We do see stuff that's just a lot of these items from Code Canyon or Theme Forest. They won't be utilizing WordPress functions. They'll be just ported over from another project or something. And not saying that everything from there is bad. You know, there are some great developers on there, but you just got to take the time to review it and make sure everything's being done correctly. And touching the database directly is another big issue that we find. Using native WordPress functions, again, that's the way to go. It's also going to just future-proof everything for later WordPress updates too. All right, some common issues that I'll see with themes, or that all of us will see with themes, and these are kind of, I'm sure the theme review team at WordPress.org sees these too. Prefixing items, all your functions, they should all be prefix classes, you know, some action hooks and filters. Those are all going to need to be prefixed. And if you guys don't know what that is, just, you guys can, I won't go into it now, but you can check the codex, and I'll be happy to talk with you guys later. Also, a lot of times they'll be adding a third-party script, and they'll prefix that. We don't want to see that because you don't want things to be loaded twice. You might have like jQuery being added, and they're adding their own version of jQuery, and then, or it's like prefix, and then you got like 3 jQueries loading. So we just try to make things, you know, load once, and it'll help out the performance of the site. Loading scripts and styles, like inline loading them, not utilizing the enqueue scripts and queue styles. That is a big one. Again, it goes back to using native WordPress functions, and not caching queries. That is another big one that we see all the time. Things are happening over and over on page load, you could use a transient for that. So we'll just recommend that. I think you wanted to. So that's all I have as far as just common issues that we've seen. As far as our code review process, again, we'll have some time for questions. You guys can feel free to ask whatever you guys want. But I'm going to hand it over to Ronnie right now.
Yeah, thanks. And I think you know, for the developer folks that want like the specific list of the things that we review, I didn't put the link in here because it's kind of ugly, but I'll definitely make sure that you have it. It's in our documentation on our site. It's not that long of a list of just bulleted things that are specific that we listed on the site as we don't allow these things, but then that's always a conversation from there. But it's the specific functions and things like that that we would search for in the code that would be a red flag that we would want to have a conversation about. So then the other piece to this is that you kind of can think about code review as something that gets done once at the beginning when you get started with the plugin. But the thing to remember is that it's really an ongoing cycle every time there's an update. Every time there's an update to WordPress core, like we want to, in terms of reliability and keeping those things in place, do we have quality assurance, you know, a QA process in place, a change management process in place? And if anything, if I've learned anything from working with a lot of higher ed institutions, is I understand that change management is like its own unique thing in higher ed than it is anywhere else in any other industry for many places. So I get that. We have a good quality assurance you know, base. At the same time, maybe that's not always implemented in the way that's most efficient for what we're trying to achieve with the sites that we're hosting here. So I guess the point is that the actual code review is just a piece of like an ongoing philosophical, procedural, all that sort of things that you want to have in place with the sites that you're working on, sites that you're hosting, sites that you're managing, or whatever it may be. And so if you take anything back, here are kind of the main point that we wanted to drive home here in the discussion was more that you guys probably already know a lot of what we said, but we wanted to instill or encourage you to reevaluate the policies that you have in place, reevaluate the procedures that you're taking, and just make sure that you have, you know, dotted all your I's, crossed all your T's, and that you have in place something that's going to make sure that you're set up to, you know, something's going to come along, like we're all upgrading to PHP 7, and that was just like a big ordeal for a lot of folks. That's just an example of if we can future-proof what we have in place, it's going to save a lot of headaches in the, you know, as we move forward. You're going to want to make changes to your infrastructure in the future. You're going to want to migrate a site from here to there, and you don't want images to get lost because the files were not uploaded to the WordPress media library. They were uploaded somewhere else, and that goes away. So you just want to be very you know, intentional about your setup from the beginning and not just kind of allow everything that's in the, I call it plugin shopping. It's a syndrome that we all have, where we go to the WordPress repo or we go to Google and we just find things that are out there, and we see lots of people are using it, and we just want to make sure that you know, we assume that maybe we should be using it too, and that's not always the case. So that's really big part of what we had. We have about 10 minutes, is that right? Yeah. Yeah, good. So again, the slides here, I tweeted out. I'll make sure that we also tweet out the link to the documentation with the specific list of functions, and we'd happy be to share like the exact like grep and command line strings and things that we use to search, and you know, we want to just turn all that over to make that as useful to folks as possible and make it your own. Ironically, our survey link was 404. At first, I thought that was like a mistake, but you know, it's kind of cool actually. That link actually works. And we were happy to sit and chat and answer questions specific about what we have in place, or go in depth a little bit more. Yeah.
So we've been implementing pretty strict code review and enforcing WordPress code style like that third-party developers. But our problem
Sure.
How you actually sell this as a plus to your customers versus just
Sure. So the question is, how do we encourage, or how do we help our customers who might be faculty members or whomever understand that all of the stuff that we just talked about, the code review process, and why we can be a little strict in place is good for them and in their best interest, without without upsetting them or them feeling like we're just ignoring or refusing to do what they want to do. So I guess the first thing that we do is we have a detailed specific list, and so we're upfront about what our procedure looks like. So all the things that we talked about, we help just from the beginning understand that this is a system we've developed and it's something that we're committed to. And we do share a little bit about why. We have tons of anecdotes and stories of different plugins and themes that we've used where, we just have to ensure them, like, say it's a theme that they want, and they want to just use this theme. They found this theme, it works perfect for their project, and it just fails miserably the test or whatever, and it just looks like it's going to be painful to make it work. Well, we just have to discuss with them, we know that you want to rely on this site, you want to use it with student, you don't want to be in the middle of a class and you get the white screen of death, or we just have to be willing to have that conversation with them, and not just a rejection. No, we always give a why. We're always very specific that it has this function or this problem in the UI, or it throws these errors. So we give very detailed feedback, and I think that's helpful as part of the process as well. So we set up first the expectations, and then we give detailed feedback, and we're willing to have that conversation. I never get back to a customer with a no without offering some solution that gets them at least mostly to where they want to be. And that's sometimes hard to do, but I'm going to make sure that we give them an out, an alternative or something. And I think that's the best I can think of. Yes, sir.
So we do code review at my company, and it's pretty strict as well. My big problem is I'm the only WordPress guy. So as I'm working, I don't actually have anybody who can review the code that I'm writing. And I'm also dealing with, inheriting themes that were written by, frankly, bad developers. So I'm not only fixing other people's problems, but I'm, building out new stuff on top of that. I use a lot of the tools that you mentioned up here. My thing is, I'm a good WordPress developer. I'm not great. And like any system, there can be a dozen ways to get from A to B with something that you're developing. So I'm wondering, do you have any recommendations with regard to somebody like me that I need human eyes to do code review for me and help me say, oh, well, there's a hook that actually does exactly what you just wrote 472 lines of code to do, and help me bridge that gap, because that's where I feel like my biggest issue is I can read stuff all day. I can go through 12 Stack Overflows and see all these answers, but at the end of the day, I don't know, just because it works, I don't know that it's good.
Right. I'll repeat the question, or I'll try. The question, I think, is, if you're a one-person shop, basically, or you're working independently on projects, or maybe you do have colleagues that just can't review exactly everything that you're doing, how can you yourself review your own code and be comfortable that what you're doing is as good as it can be? Do you have any feedback?
Yeah. You might already be using it. If not, I strongly recommend utilizing just the WordPress coding standards. As far as there's some implementations you can do on your text editor that will show you in line, hey, this is kind of shouldn't be doing this. I don't think it'll give a better option, but again, I mean, nothing is going to be exactly I would say perfect. Everyone's human. There's always going to be someone that's going to have something better, but for the most part, I'll search on Stack Overflow or on the Codex, and usually there's some good feedback on there. I hope that answered your question.
But I would
But,
say, I say the after, you've implemented something and you've published something and it's live, that would be useful to me. Just make sure that I have ways in place of monitoring what's going on in the QA process, or reviewing, logs, or what. If it's not broke, then don't fix it. I'm also a big believer in like not pushing every update ever for everything that comes out, and a lot of people disagree with me on that for security reasons, and I get it. But if you wrote 472 lines and you already wrote it, then and it's working for you, then hey, I mean, I don't think that that's necessarily a problem. It's as long as it still achieves what you're trying to do and it's not breaking anything and it's not causing a major performance hit. Does that seem reasonable?
yeah, I think so. Does anyone else have any
Questions? You guys are easy.
So let's thank our speakers.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone be willing to